The scene opens to a dark and unclear view of a boat sailing through a rough sea. A flash of light breaks through the fog, revealing the silhouette of a bleak stone island. On the highest point of the island stands a tall, crumbling lighthouse tower. Two men stand at the helm as this distant lighthouse beckons them towards the shore. A man with luggage disembarks to a scenic view of a cottage next to this lighthouse. Seagulls surround the landscape as the two stare directly into the camera. One is the senior lighthouse keeper, Thomas Wake, who has been there for many years. The new keeper, or Wiki, Ephraim Winslow, has arrived on a 4-week stint to learn from the experienced ex-sailor. He lights a cigarette in the house as a haunting score of sirens continues to play in the background. The two share a room on the top floor of the house, with Winslow's bed on the left and Wake's bed on the right. They exchange no words amongst themselves, apart from the sounds of Wake's flatulence. Winslow finds a figurine of a mermaid hidden inside his pillow. He examines it gently as the wind whooshes by, storing it safely in his jacket pocket. The two go through the motions of the day, as Winslow shovels coal into a furnace and eat their meals together around the dim light of an oil-lit lantern. Wake pours them both some alcohol, and attempts to share a toast with Winslow about their possible imminent demise due to the sea. However, Winslow refuses, to Wake's dismay, who states that it is bad luck to leave a toast unfinished. Winslow concedes, pouring himself a drink and toasting to the 4 weeks they might enjoy together. However, he immediately starts coughing, and Wake breaks into laughter, claiming that the cistern requires a cleaning before it can be drank from. He starts to instruct Winslow about his duties relating to cleaning the brass and clockwork, tidying up the quarters, and more things that are to be mended outside their house. Winslow hopes to be able to tend to the lantern as well, but Wake retorts and says that he is the only one who looks after the main light, night to morning. The two continue their meal, however, hostility brews between them. While shuffling coal into the furnace, Winslow hears the deafening noise of the lighthouse's call. Meanwhile, Wake is sitting naked at the top of the lighthouse. In a dream, Winslow is hypnotized by the ocean. He gazes into the sea as logs of wood begin to float around. As Winslow starts to walk into the ocean, he spots a body floating in the center of the logs. His eyes widen with fear as he becomes submerged in its depths. In the water, he sees a mermaid swimming towards him as a haunting scream fills his ears. He wakes up to Wake barking orders to clean the cistern and fill the lanterns with oil. Outside, Winslow heads to the shed. He tends to his chores diligently. While fixing the roof, he can see Wake sleeping on his bed. He becomes entranced by the same, perhaps signaling his latent desire, or his disdain for the senior keeper, or both. While wheeling a barrel of coal towards the house, a seagull perched at their front door stops him in his tracks. It screams at him hauntingly, and although he tries to scare the bird, it refuses to budge. He picks up a piece of coal and throws it at the bird, which then flies away. Wake watches this unfold from the top of the lighthouse. Inside the lighthouse, he struggles to carry a heavy barrel of oil up the stairs. As he is about to climb the ladder leading to the top, Wake stops him and says that he can't go there. He throws a smaller canister of oil at him, instructing him to use it next time and to transport the large barrel back down the stairs. Wake heads to the top of the lighthouse and tells Ephraim to finish his tasks quicker. In the night, the two sit around the dining table, and Wake begins to make the same toast again. Wake tries to make conversation with Winslow, telling him to lighten up a bit. Winslow says he's not one for chatter, but Wake continues. He references the Uschicopi, a real ship used during the Civil War to blockade Confederate ports, while talking about how boredom affects sailors. The only medicine for boredom is drinking. It keeps them happy and agreeable. Winslow interrupts and says that it also keeps them stupid, to which Wake breaks into laughter. Winslow asks Wake why his previous keeper left. Wake says that he went mad and passed away, raving about sirens, mermaids, and bad omens. The previous keeper believed that there was some enchantment in the light, claiming that Saint Elmo, the patron saint of sailors, had cast his fire into it. This lent the light the power of salvation. However, Winslow laughs it off as Wake's face falls. Wake brings up the incident with the seagull, advising Winslow to let them be, as it is bad luck to slay a seabird. Winslow laughs this advice off as well, and Wake suddenly slaps him in the face. His face contorts into fear as he stares up at Winslow, who is shocked by what has just happened. Embarrassed, Wake tells Winslow to ignore him. At night, while Winslow is sleeping on his bed, a seagull approaches his window. It knocks on the glass twice, waking Winslow and then flying away. The camera pans to a shot of the mermaid statuette that he found on his first day, signaling distress and uncertainty. He walks outside and spots Wake in the lighthouse. He is fully naked, with his back turned towards the glass walls. Winslow stares at him, confused, as Wake emerges from the room while putting on his clothes. The next day, we see Winslow tending to his tasks again. However, Wake claims that he has been neglecting his duties. Back in the house, Wake points out a patch of dirt on the floor and accuses Winslow of not cleaning the floors properly, despite his statement that he has washed and swept the house twice over. Winslow angrily retorts to Wake's remarks, stating that he had not gone there to be someone's slave. Wake refuses to listen to him and tells him to sweep the house again and again until everything is spotless. Wake is seen taking advantage of his position as senior keeper in this scene, as he reminds Winslow that he is at his every beck and call. He threatens to dock Winslow's wages if he does not serve him well, and Winslow agrees dejectedly, knowing that he has no other option. He continues his chores, while Wake looks over his shoulder, ensuring that everything is being done well. Winslow continues to do his tasks and eat dinner with Wake every night. However, his resignation from the situation is apparent. While whitewashing the lighthouse, Winslow is suspended in the air by an unreliable rope and stool manned at the top by Wake. The two start to bicker, accusing the other of not being careful enough with this setup, when suddenly, the rope breaks and Winslow falls to the ground with a loud thud. When he wakes up, he finds a seagull with one eye that has perched itself on his leg. The bird starts to rip at his pants violently with its beak, hurting Winslow's leg, who then shoos away the bird. In his room, Wake is seen writing in his keeper's book. At dinner, Winslow tells Wake that he would like to be referred to by his name instead of lad, as he has been doing for the past 2 weeks. Wake obliges reluctantly. He begins to ask Winslow about his previous work and lodging. He is originally from Maine, but used to work cutting timber in Canada as a lumberjack. Wake says that the sea is the only lady for him, and that he is wedded to his job as a wickie. He asks him why he came to this job, to which Winslow responds that he had had enough of trees. However, Wake keeps pushing further. He responds that since he left his family, he had done pretty much every job out there, living the life of a drifter as he seeks to settle down eventually. This post as a junior wickie allows him to earn a lot, more than he has at his other jobs. In another room, Winslow asks Wake why it is bad luck to harm a seagull. He says that they carry the souls of deceased sailors, and to slay one would bring a curse to the entire island. Late at night, we see Winslow thrash and writhe on the bed, as the mermaid statuette sits close to him. He gets up and looks for his tobacco pouch, which he is unable to find. He heads to the machine room of the lighthouse tower to look for it. He finds it, but as he begins to climb down the stairs, something stops him. He hears Wake mumble and moan incoherently, as his semen drips from the ceiling near Winslow's face. Suddenly, a strange growl comes from upstairs, and Winslow's eyes widen as we see a tentacle slither across the floor above his head and disappear into the darkness. Back in the house, he tries to pour himself water, but black sludge gushes out of the tap. He hears the sounds of loud seagulls outside and follows the sound. In the cistern outside, he sees a seagull floating in the water on its last leg, bloodying the drinking water. Another seagull, this time the one with only one eye, approaches him again. It tries to eat the injured gull, and though Winslow tries to intervene, it attacks him instead. Out of anger, Winslow grabs the seagull's neck and begins to hit it against the cement, brutally murdering it. Its blood splatters everywhere as the sound of seagulls in the distance rises. Immediately after this violent attack, the wind changes and Wake informs Winslow that it is the calm before a storm. He instructs him to board up the signal house before the storm in the morning. We also find out that the next day is Winslow's last day on the island. Winslow's shifty attitude attracts Wake's attention, who believes that something must be wrong. However, Winslow does not tell him about what transpired earlier between him and the seagull. On his last night, the two drink and chat as Winslow makes a toast to their time together. In their drunken stupor, the two sing songs about returning home, share stories about their lovers, and laugh maniacally. Wake says that he might even miss Winslow after these 4 weeks, stating that he could be working the lamp in no time. Winslow asks why he hasn't yet, and this causes Wake to stand up angrily and claim ownership of the light. After all, he is the senior wickie, and he would never let another man touch his light. Winslow concedes, and the two laugh again. They share a final toast to getting off the island as friends. The next morning, Winslow wakes up hungover and searching for water. He stumbles around the house with his pants at his knees as Wake snores in the background. He walks outside to empty the chamber pots as the storm continues to brew. Even in this weather, he is transporting and shuffling coal from one place to another. On the rocks of the island, Winslow finds an unconscious body wrapped in vines. He removes the vines from her face and neck, feeling her breasts. As he does so, his hands trail down her body, and as he reaches her lower half, it is revealed that she is a mermaid. Suddenly, she wakes up, looks him deep in the eye and screeches loudly, mimicking the sound of a seagull. Winslow rushes back to the house in a panic. Back inside, Wake asks him why he was screaming, but Winslow gives him no answer. The two head outside in the raging storm with their bags, awaiting the ship or lighthouse tender that is meant to collect them from the island. However, due to the storm, the ship does not show up. They return to the house, demoralized and afraid. Moreover, the storm has also dampened their provisions and foodstuffs. Wake says that they must start rationing, but Winslow is hopeful that the tender will come once the storm is over. After all, it has only been 1 day. However, Wake retorts and says that it has been weeks since they missed the tender, and that he has been barking at Winslow to ration for weeks now. Wake believes that they are stranded, and that relief will only come if they can wait out the storm. Wake begins to tell Winslow about another wickie who had been marooned on the island for 7 months. Although the storm ended on the mainland, the waters were too wild near the island for help to arrive. This story scares Winslow about what is to come. Wake brings Winslow outside with a shovel, instructing him to dig at a spot by the lighthouse's base. Under it is a crate which Wake assumes contains reserve rations, but it is instead full of bottles of alcohol. Back in the house, Wake and Winslow collect and count their rations. Growing more and more suspicious of Wake, Winslow spots a dinner knife on the table, which he secretly keeps in his pocket. The two begin to get drunk every night, alternating between moments of intimacy and hostility. One night while drunk, Winslow begins talking about someone he used to work with, named Winslow. This piques Wake's attention, who begins to question him about this man. Winslow says that Foreman Winslow was always belittling him, just like Wake. However, The topic soon changes, as Winslow starts talking about how Wake used to eat grass with no teeth. This confusing metaphor escalates into a screaming match between the two, ending with Winslow loudly exclaiming that he wants a steak. Wake is hurt and upset that Winslow isn't a fan of the food on the island. He tries to get Winslow to admit that he likes his lobster, but he refuses to do so. Wake rises in a fit of fury, calling upon Neptune, the Roman god of the sea, to strike Winslow, cursing him to a bloody demise. He speaks passionately as the storm thunders in the background. Winslow's face contorts with fear, as he reluctantly admits that he does like his cooking. Winslow stares at the lighthouse, hypnotized by its circling light. He takes out the dinner knife and clutches it close to his chest. He unlaces his boots and slinks up the lighthouse stairs. He attempts to pick the lock of the lantern room with the kitchen knife, but suddenly, the knife blade breaks into two. Then, he goes down to Wake's desk in his office. With the remnants of the knife blade, he opens the desk, but finds that the logbook is gone. Upstairs in his room, Wake is sleeping soundly with the logbook on his stomach. Winslow tries to grab the logbook, but then notices that a set of keys lies next to Wake. He slowly pulls out the knife and holds it close to Wake's throat, but the floorboard betrays him. The senior keeper wakes up suddenly and comments on the way Winslow is wearing his shoes hanging from his back pocket. Wake goes back to sleep and instructs Winslow to return to his duties. Winslow stands up apprehensively, staring at Wake's half-awake body. He tells Wake that he isn't even human anymore, after working away from other people for so long. Wake exclaims that he must get back to work, shutting Winslow down. He smiles menacingly at Wake, before he heads back outside in the pouring rain to tend to his chores. In the supply room, Winslow is guzzling alcohol while working. While pulling out a lobster trap from the sea, he begins to see images of the mermaid's breasts and mouth, the phallic lighthouse spinning, slimy tentacles, and him having intercourse with the mermaid. His fantasy turns into a nightmare as he sees a man's face submerged in the water. He masturbates in the supply room while holding the mermaid figurine in his hand. After finishing, he falls to the floor, weeping. He takes out his knife and begins to stab the mermaid statuette repeatedly. In the lobster trap, he sees the shriveled corpse of a man with one eye. Small crabs start to crawl out from the one-eyed man's socket. He almost falls into the ocean from the terror and shock of these visions. As the thunder claps, Winslow and Wake are chugging alcohol. They link arms with one another and begin to dance and sing a sea shanty. Wake starts diddling 10-penny bit and dancing a jig. Winslow joins the diddling and jigging. The atmosphere turns competitive and fierce. Lightning flashes through the window, and the two are seen holding each other while slow dancing. Wake sings a haunting yet tender ballad, and this softens Winslow's mood. The two look at each other deeply, and it seems as though they might kiss, but they push each other away at the last moment. They put up their fists like old-time boxers, and take turns hitting each other. Moments between the two keep oscillating between intimacy and animosity. The two are so drunk that Wake is cradled in Winslow's arms. Winslow starts to divulge his secrets to Wake, confessing that his real name is Thomas Howard. Apprehensively, he starts to confess that he murdered someone in the past, whose name was Ephraim Winslow. The story goes that he saw the real Winslow slip and drown in the river. All Howard did was stand by and watch, screaming, "Tom, you dog," at him. All he could think after the real Winslow passed was that he could really use a smoke. He felt no remorse at the time. Instead, he packed up his kit and things, as if they were his own, since Ephraim Winslow had a clean slate, unlike Thomas Howard. So he assumed his identity. Howard calls out for Wake, but all the senior wiki asks is why he's telling him this. Howard is now in the lighthouse's machine room. The door to the catwalk flies open, and he walks inside to find a body lying face down. He walks further to inspect the body, and sees that it is his own. Suddenly, someone grabs his wrist from behind, spinning him around. It is Wake, standing tall above him, completely naked. Howard runs through the storm and heads toward the dory, a small flat-bottomed rowing boat. While trying to launch the boat, Wake approaches him from behind. He swipes through the air with an axe, smashing the dory, begging him not to leave him there alone. Howard runs back inside to their quarters as Wake limps behind him, swinging the axe in his arms. The two run around the house, screaming and yelling at each other. Howard exclaims that he knows what Wake has done. He murdered his previous second-in-command, the one-eyed junior wiki. He found him in the lobster pot. He pulls out the mermaid trinket, claiming it is what drove the previous second mad. But now, Howard has broken the statuette, meaning that he is free from his designs and tactics. He claps his hands maniacally as Wake stares at him blankly. He says he has figured out Wake completely, except for the secrets he is hiding at the top of the lighthouse. Then, Wake starts talking. He says that Howard is the one who confessed earlier, and that is what has been driving him mad. He says that he was the one who had just smashed up the lifeboat and chased him with an axe. He asks Howard for the dinner knife, which he hands over reluctantly. Wake continues to badger Howard, asking him questions about where they are, who he is, and how long they've been on the island. He attempts to manipulate Howard by claiming that everything there is a figment of his imagination, including Wake himself. Howard plops down on the floor, saying he could use a smoke. Now that the two are out of alcohol, they begin making a concoction of honey and turpentine in a brass oil canister, dubbed Thieves' Oil. They gag while drinking it, but continue doing so while screaming and banging their chests like apes. The storm rages on, and the tumultuous sea threatens their safety. Gigantic waves crash on the shore. It is the beginning of the end. Wake and Howard laugh and drink together, holding cups of thieves' oil in their hands. Suddenly, the force of a wave crashes through a window. Water floods into the room at rapid speed. But Howard and Wake don't notice. They continue laughing. In the morning, the kitchen is a disaster. The quarters room is half flooded. Suddenly, Howard falls to the floor amidst the water and begins to throw up. The logbook floats by, open. He grabs it and starts leafing through the pages. Suddenly, his face drops. Out of anger, he smashes the clock with his fist. Wake is in another room, trying to find a matchstick to light his pipe with. The sound of a matchstick lighting from behind startles him, and he turns around to find Howard standing with a lit match. He calmly lights Wake's pipe. Wake bursts into his usual monologues, but Howard has had enough. He tells him that he is sick of his chatter, that his whole life is worthless. Howard is at the end of his rope, frustrated with having to deal with Wake for these past weeks. He calls him a drunken liar, and then reveals the logbook. He begins to read out all of the submissions that Wake wrote about Howard's incompetence. Wake has remarked on his lack of discipline, his drunken stupor, his hostile attitude, and his self-flagellation in the supply shed. He then recommends that Howard be sacked with no pay. Wake calls Howard a liar, but Howard refuses to listen. He gets down on his knees and begs the man to let him into the lighthouse. Howard lunges at Wake, trying to get past the breezeway toward the tower. Wake stops him in his tracks and tells him that he knows he murdered the seagull, thus causing the winds on the island to shift. He taunts Howard, and the two attack each other at the same time. They choke each other, violently thrashing on the floor. Their animalistic grunts, heavy breathing, and screaming take over the score. Suddenly, Howard looks down and sees Ephraim Winslow staring back at him. Howard is in terror, and Ephraim Winslow spits in his face. He goes to strangle him, but as he does, Winslow turns into the mermaid. She strangles Howard as her mermaid tail thrashes in the back. He tries to get away, but then suddenly, the mermaid turns into Wake. He is naked, his beard is longer, and he is covered in seaweed and shells. Howard tries to punch him, but Wake's enormous tentacle legs choke him. He punches him repeatedly, and when he looks down, his hands are bloody. He has beaten Wake into a pulp. Howard stands up and screams at Wake to bark for him. He does so, after which Howard ties a rope to his neck and walks him around, like a dog on all fours. They walk to the grave-sized hole they dug earlier. Howard tells him to get in the grave, and Wake stumbles in. He picks up a shovel and starts burying Wake. Wake starts talking as Howard shovels dirt into his mouth. Wake's last words are a prayer to Proteus, cursing Howard to be punished brutally. Suddenly, Howard slides into the grave and picks Wake up. He grabs the brass keys from around his neck. Finally, Howard is ready to go into the lantern room, but something stops him. He pats his breast pocket and realizes he doesn't have cigarettes, so he heads back to their quarters. Suddenly, Wake emerges from behind him, covered in mud and barely alive. He swings the axe and hits Howard's shoulders. Howard picks up the iron kettle and swings it around, bashing Wake's face with it. He falls to the ground, moaning. Howard picks up the axe, lifts it high, and drives the axe into Wake's head with a blood-curdling crunch. Blood splatters across the room as Wake finally meets his end. He stumbles to the table and lights himself a cigarette. He grabs the turpentine and toasts to Wake's favorite drink. Howard crawls up to the lantern room, trembling and bleeding profusely. He ascends the ladder and slowly opens the hatch to the top floor of the lighthouse. The dazzling light swirls around him, hypnotizing Howard. He looks ahead and sees the lens. It is a massive, 6-foot-tall jewel of indescribable beauty with 8 shimmering brass legs. It seems to sing at him. Slowly, the doors of the lens open like wings, facing him. The light grows brighter as Howard takes it in, and a small teardrop falls from his eye. He smiles and slowly puts his hand into the light. His face falls as he starts to shake with insanity. He screeches loudly as the light engulfs him. He loses his balance and falls out of frame, out of the lantern room, all the way down the long winding staircase. Finally, we see Howard lying naked on a rock outside. His bones are broken, and he has gone blind. Seaweed wraps around him as seagulls peck at his abdomen. The one-eyed gull is back, and it pulls out Howard's liver. Seagulls eat him, as he is left alone to perish on the rock.